About 2 years ago, Rhinos kept nagging me to read this book, and they mailed me a copy of Advance, and they sent me another Galleon, and the rep asked if I'd read it yet, and I kept putting it off because I've read so many Mars books. I could make a list of all the Mars novels I've read. It seemed to be like the coming-of-age thing. You are a science fiction writer, you must write a novel set on Mars. And I've read them from Robert Silverberg to Graham Joyce. I'm sick of Mars. I still read the Martian. I'm sick of Mars. They're like, oh, so finally I talked to Scott. Scott, being a vice president, is quite persuasive. And told me I should read the book. And I finally sat down and started reading Red Rising. My response then was, why haven't I read this before? And of course, after having finished the book, the response was, well, where's book two? One advantage of delaying was I had book two already in my possession. I could read Golden Sun, which I will not talk about because you will kill me for the spoilers in the book, because none of Pierce's books, I would say, full of stable, peaceful, placid, domestic scenes. I assume most of you read Red Rising. It's not exactly laid back. Golden Sun is violating all the rules of trilogies, I'd like to point out, which is that the rule of a trilogy is the second book usually sucks. And Locus actually used the term for years, middle book syndrome, to describe epic fantasy and science fiction, where the author writes all these cool things in book one and saves all the really neat stuff they thought of for book three. And Pierce is determined to break this rule because the book is better than the first book. So congratulations on that. We finally got him up here after a couple of years of whining at his publisher, which I appreciate that. So please welcome Pierce Brown.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to jump for this. Don't worry, I'm good. I'll just project.
Let's turn it off.
Yeah, if you guys can't hear me, just raise your hand and I'll speak. Can you hear me fine?
Use the mic.
No, Mom, I don't use a mic. My mom thinks she's my handler. She's been at I've had 3 signings. She's been at 2 of them. And one was in California. Now she's following me, I think. Oh, my dad's there too. So if you want to say hi to him later and bug him, yeah, applaud him, right? His genes. So I guess that's the best thing that can be said about your second book, is that it doesn't suck. So I'll take that plug, thank you. And I'm really excited about Golden Sun, and I hope most of you have read Red Rising. The selection I'm going to read might make more sense if you have. But if not, here's a little just understanding of what's happening. Is Darrow Andromedus, our main character, is in the academy right now. So this is the follow-up of the Institute, and it's the end of the academy, the last day, and he's hunting his quarry, which is Carnus Albolona. Who, yeah.
I think you really should use the mic. It's not bad.
Can you guys can you not hear me?
Background noise in the back.
Yeah.
All right.
All
All right.
I don't want them to say they can't hear you, so we'll lower the mic.
Yeah. Okay.
I like one. Never had to raise the mic yet, so anyone knows like a 7-foot science fiction writer.
All right.
All right, is good? Oh. Now I sound manly. So it's the last day of the academy, and Carnus Albolona, who's the elder brother to Cassius Albolona, is about to ram Darrow's ship. I should mention they're in ships, spaceships, and he's about to ram Darrow's ship with his own. Let's see. The ship, is going to ram us. Evac suits and pods, I shout. Someone's screaming for us to brace for impact. I rush to the side of the bridge where my command escape pod is built into the wall. It opens at my word. Tactus, Roke, and Victra sprint into its confines. I hold back, shouting at the Blues to hurry and unsync from the computer. For all their logic, they'll die for their ships. I range about the bridge, screaming at them to activate their escape hatch. The Helm Blue does, pressing a button that causes a hole to dilate in the floor of the pit. One by one, they unsync and are sucked down into the gravity tube, down into their escape pod. Theodora, I shout, seeing her prying at a young Blue who still clutches the operations display with white-knuckled fear. Get in the gory damn pod. She doesn't listen, nor does the Blue let go. I start towards them just as the proximity sensor lets loose one final warning blast. All slows. Bridge lights throb red. I jump for Theodora, wrapping my arms around her, and the destroyer hits my man of war at her midline. Clutching Theodora to my chest, I'm thrown 30 meters across my bridge, slamming into a metal wall. White pain rips across my left arm, along the seams of the mending brake. I'm slapped with darkness. Lights dance there, first like stars, then as weaving lines of sand disturbed by wind. Red light seeps through my eyelids. A gentle hand pulls at my clothing. I open my eyes. I'm wrapped around a dented electrical column as the ship shudders, groaning like an ancient dying beast sinking into the deep. The column trembles violently against my stomach as the destroyer finishes shearing through our middle, gutting us with slow cruelty. Someone shouting my name. Sound fades back into being. Lights bathe the bridge, alternating shades of murderous red. Warning sirens. The ship's swan song. Theodora's delicate old hands pull at me like a bird pulling at a fallen statue. I'm bleeding from my forehead. My nose is broken. I wipe the stinging blood from my eyes and roll onto my back. A broken display sparks beside me. It has my blood on it. Did it fall behind me? On me? A bar lies beside it, and my eyes drift to Theodora. She pried it off, but she's so small. Her hands now cut my face. Get up, Dominus. If you want to live, you have to get up. The old woman's hands tremble with fear. Please, get up. Groaning, I pull myself to my feet. My command escape pod is gone. In the collision, it must have launched. Either that or it left me behind. So too is the blue escape pod jettisoned away. The frightened blue has become a stain on a bulkhead. Theodora can't tear her eyes away from the sight. There's another pod in my quarters, I mutter. Then I see why Theodora winces, not from fear, but pain. Her leg is shattered, splayed off to the side like a length of wet, cracked chalk. They don't make pinks to last through this. I won't make it, Dominus. Go now. I bend to a knee and throw her over my shoulder, over my good arm. She whimpers horribly as her leg shifts under her. I feel her teeth rattle, and I run. I run through the broken bridge toward the wound that is killing my ship, through the bridge's level hallways, into a scene of chaos. People swarm through the main halls, abandoning their posts and functions as they race to escape pods and the troop carriers in the forward hangar. People who fought for me, electricians, janitors, soldiers, cooks, valets. They'll never make it to safety. Many change course when they see me. They tumble forward, leaning against me, panicked and crazed in their mania to find safety. They pull at me, screaming, pleading. I push them off, losing a small part of my heart as each falls behind. I can't save them. An orange grabs Theodora's good leg, and a gray sergeant hits him in the forehead till he drops like a stone to the ground. Clear a path, the thick gray bellows. She whips her scorcher out, or a tactical holster, and shoots it into the air. Another gray, remembering himself, or perhaps thinking I'm his ticket out of this death trap, joins her, imparting the chaos. Soon 2 more carve a path at gunpoint. With their help, I make it to my suite. The door hisses open at my DNA's touch, and we move through. The grays fall in after us, training their scorchers at 30 desperate souls who ring the entrance. The door hisses as if to close, but an obsidian pushes through the crowd and jams herself into the doorframe, preventing the door from closing. An orange joins her, then a low-ranking blue. Without hesitation, the gray sergeant shoots the obsidian in the head. Her companions gun down the blue and the orange and shove them out of the doorframe so it can close. I tear my eyes away from the blood on the ground to lay Theodora on one of my couches. Dominus, how much room is in the escape pod? The gray sergeant asks me as I head to the pod's entry lock. Her hair is buzzed in military fashion. A tattoo on her tan neck peeks from under her collar. My hands fly over the control prism, entering the password of the series of hand motions. 4 seats. You get 2. Decide amongst yourselves. There's 6 of us. 2, the female sergeant asks coldly. But the pink's a slave, one of the grays hisses. Not with shit, says another. She's my slave, I growl. Do as I say. Slag that. Then I feel the silence as much as hear it, and I know one of them has pulled a gun on me. I turn slowly. The stocky old gray is not a fool. He's backed out of my reach. I have no armor, only my razor. I might be able to kill him. The others ask what the hell he thinks he's doing. I'm a free man, Dominus. I should get to go, the gray says, voice trembling in fear. I have family. It's my right to go. He looks to his fellows, bathed in the nasty red of the emergency lights. She's a whore. Just a jumped-up whore. Marcel, put the gun down, says the dark-skinned corporal. His eyes are heavy for his friend. Remember your vows. We'll draw lots. It's not fair. She can't even have children. And what would your children think of you now, I ask. Marcel's eyes flush with tears. The scorcher quivers in his thick hand, then a gunshot. His body stiffens and crumples lifelessly to the deck as the bullet from the sergeant's scorcher carries through his head to slam into the metal bulkhead. We do it by rank, the sergeant says, holstering her weapon. Were I still the man Io knew, I would have stood frozen in horror. But that man is gone. I mourn his passing every day, forgetting more and more of who I was, what dreams I held, what things I loved. The sadness now is numb, and I carry on despite the shadow it casts over me. The escape pod opens, magnetic lock thudding back. The door hisses upward, and I pick Theodore from the couch and strap her into one of the seats. The straps are nearly too big, made for golds. Then something deep, something horrible roars in the belly of my ship, half a kilometer away, and our torpedo stores detonate. That's that. So that's in the first about like 10 pages, so I didn't spoil anything, hopefully, because everything's kind of tied together pretty closely, so I was racking my head of what to read to you all. And I want to sort of open this up to a question and answer. So if you have anything clever to say or anything witty, that's great. Just no spoilers, please, because we've had some people get really overeager. So, anyone?
ETA for book 3.
Under construction. I'm writing it right now, so I'm halfway through. But I'm sure my editor would love to know as well.
I actually have a question about your dedication. So it's kind of fitting because your parents are here.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I'm curious what that means. The walk and talk business.
The walk and talk. Yeah, they do too. So for you who don't know what she's talking about, the first book is dedicated to my father who taught me to walk. The second book to my mother who taught me to speak. And the third book, we'll find out who it's dedicated to. But basically, I think my father taught me how to live my life and how to be the man I want to be. It's mostly by emulating him. I say that because he's here and because I was getting brownie points. And because he picked me up in the airport today, so thank you. But also because, throughout my life I saw my parents being role models and that I never saw them being selfish. I never saw them putting themselves above raising their children. And while that's not obviously addressed in that one little line of who taught me to walk, my dad has always been my role model. And so that's how I wanted to live my life in the same footsteps he has, or following those footsteps. And my mom is who taught me to speak. She taught me really how to voice my opinion. And not necessarily how to listen, but how to talk. No, my sister was more for that, but my mom and I are sometimes too much alike. And I talk a lot, as you might have noticed. But people weren't listening to me, so then I wrote it down so they had to read it.
I was wondering if, is it a choice by your publisher, or was it a conscious choice to be more, it's been kind of labeled a YA book.
Yeah.
Or if that was something you set out to do, or was that simply a publisher choice? And even though it's labeled YA, it's pretty violent compared to other YA books, I guess.
No, that's a curious question because he asked basically why is Red Rising listed as YA some places? Okay. And was it a publisher choice? And, I don't know. The publisher wouldn't tell you it's YA. They'd cleverly just step to the side and let you think what you want. But it's a crossover book. It's written about a 16-year-old with adult themes. Now, YA books, it's interesting when you ask people what YA means, everyone thinks something different, right? Because Ender's Game was written about, a 6-year-old, and then maybe, how old was he at the end? Does anyone remember? 9 maybe? Yeah, so it was about 9, but obviously adult-centric themes. But if they listed it now, it would be called children's fiction or young adult. Yet, it's obviously a lot more mature than that. And I think even the realism in Ender's Game, as much as aliens can be real, but the realism and the violence of it, is almost as intense as Red Rising, and some places more intense. When Ender kills the kid when he's 5 years old, that's not a YA trope, really. Yet it would be categorized as YA. So I think the line is pretty blurred, and I think that with Red Rising especially is, although Golden Sun is, Darrow does turn, he's 20 at the beginning of the book. And so you have a bit of a departure from the YA spectrum, I guess. But as for it being intended to be YA, I tried to write a YA novel, and then I just ended up killing half the cast, so in pretty gruesome ways. So it's my attempt at a YA novel, so that's as YA as I can go.
You tend to write a lot in isolation, at least for your first draft. Why do you do that?
How do you know I write in isolation? Basically, because I can't concentrate when people are around. Sean was back there with me signing, and if anyone was talking to me, I misspelled my own name. I'm not even kidding. I started signing something else, and I just put the date as 1/4 instead of 1/5, which I did for 30 books yesterday. So,
Those are rare copies if you find it dated for like for last year. The book was not completed until this year. But anyway, I would say because I need to concentrate fully on it, but also because particularly for Darrow, there's such a melancholy sense to his character that when I'm happy and socializing with people, then it's hard to really represent that melancholy, if you know what I mean. And you know, I sometimes have difficulty separating myself from my writing at the time, or from my writing at the time that I'm doing it, because it, well, I'm not very good at putting 6 hours aside and writing. I kind of write the entire day. And so if I'm writing the entire day, and then my friend asks me to go get a drink, and then I show up with like Darrow on my mind, I'm not a very pleasant person. So I'm just like, let's do shots. Yeah, and then go shoot things. No, only sometimes. But basically just to capture the melancholy and also to get a work ethic. I mean, my buddy Joel, who did the maps in Red Rising, did all the symbols that you now see, like someone got a tattoo of it on their neck. I question the judgment, but not their dedication. And Joel and I went up for 2 weeks to my parents have a cabin out on the coast of Washington, and it's like the wind was 40 miles an hour. You had storms the entire time, and it's hard not to be inspired when you're writing out there. I mean, if the book ends up being bad, it's my fault, not the storms.
I was wondering, as you're building your world and your society, what motivates you to choose to build a colorstocracy, a white color?
Why a colorstocracy? 2 reasons. So, like, I think that, well, 3 reasons. A lot of reasons. I'm finding out a lot of new things about myself. I'm making half these up. You can guess which ones. So why colorstocracy? I mean, the first reason is I think that in like freedom of choice is something that is the hallmark of progress in Western democracy. So I think the taking away freedom of choice, freedom of action, freedom of career in life is something that is very dystopian, but also very established throughout human history. Is others telling others what they can do, and the limitation on freedom of speech, freedom of action, etc. So I think that that's a theme that particularly resonated with me. But then I was influenced by Plato's Republic, because I don't know who else has read it, but basically there's a tenet in there where Plato suggests in the perfect society, which is ruled by philosopher kings, which are these men with kind of like gold spirits, that people should, like men of iron who have this iron kind of soul, should do jobs of iron, men of copper should do jobs of copper. And what he means by that is a complete meritocracy. So people who, which is obviously not what we have in Red Rising. The meritocracy element is perverted, I think, sometimes, and often, like just like communism was perverted by the Soviet system, and meritocracy can sometimes be perverted by a plutocracy of wealth being created. So you have these oligarchs who rule the society basically by concentrating power amongst their relatives, amongst their friends, and you have a corruption of this idea. So what I started Red Rising with in their world was a meritocracy, and it was very noble in its aim, and then it began to devolve as the human element kicked in, which politics tends to do. So it seemed natural for the Red Rising world. Now the third one was, I read this amazing essay by David Foster Wallace, who wrote basically about the cruise liner. At one time he was paid, I think, like probably like $200 for the article. But he was paid to go on a cruise line, and for 40 pages he talked about his experience on this cruise liner, and he was talking about how the ethnicities were broken, the jobs were broken down by various ethnicities. So the commanders of this cruise liner were all of Greek descent, and then the bus boys were all of from Sierra Leone, or everything was an ethnotype. And he thought it was very interesting how it would break down based on that. And I thought it was interesting, especially lending that to a sci-fi world. So that's like the culmination of it all. So David Foster Wallace, yeah, and Plato, right? Makes me sound smart. Please.
What character is your favorite to write?
What character is my favorite to write?
You can say Darrow.
Severo's the easiest to write, because it's straight like, what is the most insulting thing I could say at every single page? Basically, like Severo's the kind of kid, like I grew up with a kid who reminded me, who Severo's based on, and I was one time in a little fight in the schoolyard, and this is like,
ninth grade fight, so we're punching in slow motion, right? So I'm punching in slow motion this kid, then all of a sudden this kid named Alex jumps on the back of the kid I'm fighting, like bites his ear. So I'm like, so when I'm thinking about what do I make this crazy character, all I'm thinking of is this little redheaded kid doing this, like, so. What's that? Why could he not be redheaded? Because Alex was redheaded. You have to ask his parents, I don't know. I'm sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding. She doesn't communicate well, if you didn't hear. No, but Severa's the easiest. I think Mustang's the hardest to write because she's smarter than my main character, who's already smarter than I am. So we're just stages of removal from the natural process of how I write, so I have to rewrite and rewrite Mustang because she has to be cleverer than a character who the entire story centers around. And she also has to be captivating enough for him in a romantic way, but also to be inspired by her, but also see hope in her. So she's a very layered creature, as all women are. So, and also, I think the other most fun I had writing a character was Paxow Telemanos. Mostly because my phone autocorrects to all caps Paxow Telemanos whenever I text now. But he's just fun to write because he was just this one wonderful, free-spirited, silly soul. Yeah.
What was the inspiration for Victra? 'Cause I'm reading this right
Oh
now.
yeah, you're
I
into
like
it.
her character.
How deep are you?
300 or something.
So you're reading, you're finishing it now, okay.
Yeah, I'm finishing it.
Be honest, yeah. So my inspiration for Victra. Victra is actually based off of a character. Does anyone here know Gene Wolfe, the writer? So Gene Wolfe's Shadow and Claw series is one of my favorite, and it's this really, really dense work. It's like hard to get through. I love Gene Wolfe, and it's really trying to get through it. I basically used to read it to fall asleep, but I also love it. So it's a weird relationship. But there's this character in it called Severian the Torturer, who basically is excommunicated from his guild, and he walks around the countryside hiring out his, he has a huge sword, and he walks around the countryside basically hiring his job cutting off heads. And so he's this very tall, rangy, mean guy who's very charismatic in this very soft, subtle way, and Victra is based off of him. Because I think that a lot of times I think female characters in sci-fi and fantasy kind of seem to resemble one another. So I thought, what if I wrote a character as though she was a man, or as it was a man, but then made it a woman? So she's full on, like, written as a man, as a woman.
That's great.
Yeah, that's complicated, but
Follow-up
yeah.
question. Did you know in Red Rising that you were going to add her in the second book?
Yeah, she was always Victor's half-sister. I'm sorry, Antonia's half-sister, yeah. So Victra is this really mean-spirited, violent character who is the sister of Antonia, who you may remember cuts throats for fun. So, yeah, they grew up in a weird household. Do you have one? Or are you stretching? Yeah.
Okay, so I have a book club, and your book was chosen for the book of the month.
I'm sorry. I'm kidding, I'm not sorry. Obviously.
So we had like some, it was a great book to discuss actually, because we had some, split decisions on it, and different thoughts about it. And the girly girls were like, oh, and the rest of us were like, yeah. So it's a great book actually.
So you're saying you're not a girly girl? All right.
And so I bought it for my dad on Amazon to put on his Kindle, and my dad knows about my book club, but he never really reads any of it because
He just reads the girly stuff.
he does not
Yeah.
want to read the girly stuff. So he texted me immediately and said, "Is this a chick book?" And I said, "I like it, so if you're gauging it off like that, I'm a chick, so yeah." But no, I wouldn't label it as a chick book. And so over Christmas I saw him, and he said, I said, "How's the book going, Dad?" And he said, "Well, I'm really trying to visualize Darrow. There's a lot of transformation happening to him, and I just wish there was a picture of him." And then immediately I knew he liked it, because then you don't think about a book that much and a character that much. So he wants to know if you've got movie thoughts in mind.
That was about a movie?
Yeah. He wants to see.
You should have let her that, then I would have said no comment. No, so movie thoughts in terms of like actors?
Yes.
Or, okay. Well, the most important thing, they can pretty much, they made the Hobbits look, 4 feet tall, so it's not like we have to find a 7 foot tall actor out there who's also beautiful, because there's like none. But basically, my entire what I want in terms of for the movie. So the movie rights were sold to Universal, and we're developing it with the director Mark Forster, who did World War Z. And so, this is all, we're having these conversations because, the executives ask me, what does he look like? And they show you pictures of people, and I'm like, does he look like this? Does he look like this? Like, does their skin shine, or do they walk around shining? I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm like, did you work on Twilight? Yeah. And then she said, yeah. What I want first and foremost is an actor who comes from a storytelling background, like someone who's either from the stage or from anonymity. Because what we want to do with the movie is create someone and then push them onto the world stage. Like, that's what it is. I think the Hunger Games did it so appropriately with Jennifer Lawrence, because they took someone who was relatively unknown, except for the girl in the red dress. I knew her as that. There's pictures. And presented her on the stage as the character. I think that's so much more important than taking a character like they did with Tom Cruise and Jack Reacher, because I think that took a lot of people out of the story and then became a Tom Cruise movie instead of Jack Reacher, right? So what we're looking for is someone who can act, and then they'll do the rest. And a lot of it, is with what I want is something very muted, so not their eyes like shining in the night, like the dark or anything like that. They're not walking in with like LED lights in their eyes. They're just like kind of subtle gold. So it's basically based off of eugenics, and then we'll see what actor can hold it up. As for the older people, I have no idea. So we're still developing the script right now.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So on the movie thing, how involved are you planning to be? Because I know that there are authors. who
How
say
involved
that-
am I planning to be, or how involved am I gonna be? I'm planning on being like Darrow, so I'm just gonna grow a little bit. That's it.
There are authors who say that they're involved the whole way, and then the movie comes out and it's clear that they weren't involved at all.
You're involved the whole way, but you don't have. They're putting in with these movies. They put in $100 million, and I think they should have some say. So, and it's hard because they want. We all have the same goal. We want the movie to be seen by the most amount of people. But I have an other goal that I want it to be good. So, which necessarily isn't a prerequisite for movies these days. So I'm going to be very involved because I brought Mark Forster in on the project before we took it to Universal. So what we did was I found that he was a fan of the book, then we talked, and then I wrote a script. And then we floated it onto the town, they call it. It's really cool things for things. It's like we let it out to the town on a weekday, like on a Friday, and then all the studios got to read it over the weekend. And then on Monday we had a bidding war between Sony and Universal. So it means we found a partner we wanted, because we went to Universal because they thought they'd have the best adaptation of it, and also because they would give Mark the most freedom, which is hopefully going to be true to the book. So me working with Mark is big in terms of developing the sets, in terms of developing the technology they use and the drawing of things, and in making sure their eyes don't glow at night, or their skin, or whatever else happens. I have no idea. But so that's how involved I intend to be, but I'm pretty sure I'm in for some surprises with Hollywood's concerned. But I also live in LA, so I'm there to talk on a day-to-day basis, which is better than me living in Ohio and having to commute or talk on the telephone, and then being able to call me up with periodic news of what they've done and which characters they've made male, female, or a dog. Those things happen, by the way.
After we finish Golden Sun, what should we read next this year?
Ooh.
Or later?
Probably Armada when it comes out. It's by Ernest Cline, who wrote Ready Player One. If you haven't read Ready Player One, read Ready Player One. Yeah, or let's see, what else? I really liked Station 11. That came out last year. And you should brush up on your classics if you haven't read Sophocles. He's lonely. He needs some love. Do you have another one? Yeah.
I just wanted to let you know that I can make myself available as your date for the premiere of the movie.
Sweetie, I was already going to ask later. You didn't get my text? She never checks her phone these days. It's like she thinks she's too good for me.
Try to be respectful and silence me.
Yeah, after I talk about the movie, you get excited.
In the section you read, I saw some similarities with Star Trek. Do you have any influences in any major sci-fi franchises that helped you write the book?
Are you talking about sparks coming from a computer?
No,
Yeah.
it was more
No, I was teasing you. Basically, do I have any influences? Yeah, Star Trek is actually, I'm not the hugest fan of Star Trek. I'm more of a Star Wars guy. In that the sci-fi I like telling is fantasy with sci-fi clothing on. And there's a big difference, I think. Like science fiction, like hard science fiction is something that I like, but I'm never really particularly inspired to go off of. I like Hyperion cantos, Dan Simmons, which is just incredibly impressive. Other sci-fi I like, I love the movie Gattaca, which obviously factored into the eugenics we get into with Red Rising. She's like, yeah. And then there is also even Children of Men in some of the, visualizing some of the slums and things like that. But Star Wars is a huge influence, because how could it not be? Because it really did introduce to me, it reintroduced to me the idea. Actually, I saw Star Wars, I think, re-released with my dad. What did we see? Return of the Jedi first, when it was like in '96, the re-release. So my head was like blown off. I had no idea that could happen. So I was like, ships, smart lasers. And so then 7 more years of me running around the house doing, I'm your father. So my dad didn't know what he was biting off. But Dune is a huge influence. I was gonna say Star Wars introduced me to fantasy and in sci-fi clothing, but Dune actually did that. Because Dune, I think, is like probably the most similar to Red Rising of anything. It's like Dune and meets Count of Monte Cristo is how I introduce the book. Whenever I'm told to pitch it. I hate pitching it like that, but if I have to pitch anything, I'll do that. Except there aren't any sandworms, we have claw drills instead. Mom, you have a question.
Well, I think it would be fun for you to share how you prep to write with music.
She's trying to handle me, guys. Are we gonna put up with this? Listen to my mom. Says my cousin. I'm getting handled by everyone. The women in my family are not very strong-minded. Sarcasm. Yeah, and there's another cousin. Yeah, so what I prepped getting in music because I'm terrible at listening to lyrics. I can never repeat lyrics in a song. Like my favorite songs, I get half the lyrics right. Like my friends back there will know, if I sing along to a song, I'll be like, walking in Memphis, blue suede shoes, that's all I got. So my karaoke skills are pretty terrible, but it helps me when I do listen to music though, because I don't hear that. What I hear is the tonal qualities to it, and so I'm able to capture that and dilute it down to its boil it down to its base elements, and then put it into scenes. So when I'm writing a scene, I'll listen to a song 54 times in a row on loop, and try to, I know, it's horrible for my roommates, but they're usually not up for 11 anyway. But I'll just listen to really depressing music, and on loop, and then basically write a scene to it. And because I'm trying to find the tonal quality that I attach to that song, in that song, the thing that makes me want to cry, or the feeling of loss in the song. Because I think songs are like snapshots in time, and I think that scenes are as well. And one of my favorite things about Red Rising and Golden Sun is Darrow in particular is the ability to capture some scenes, because he is so melancholy and he has such an internal dialogue, and really create these almost photographs or these songs within the book that I can remember tonally. So basically, that's my process. My mom wanted me to tell.
So what is,
and Taylor Swift.
what is his theme song then?
His theme song? Probably, what is it? Buried in the Murder by The Lonely Wild. Anyone know them? You should look them up. They're amazing. Or Your Bones by Monsters and Men. Yeah. Or Say What You Want to Say by John Mayer. I'm kidding. I hate that song. I really think that John Mayer won a bet with a friend saying he could repeat the same line 72 times in a song and make it go platinum. I don't understand it. So that's that bit of my perspective.
What's the average lifespan of a low red?
Average lifespan of a low red is about 39 to about 45 for the men. The women last a bit longer because they're not in the mines with the pit vipers, but they do get cancer generally by the ventilation systems, depending, because they usually don't fix them, but there's massive amounts of radiation at that level of Mars because of the terraforming and also because of the equipment they use. And so a lot of them die of a thing called rust lung, basically, which is degeneration of the tissue in the lungs. So when I say someone's old at 35, you know what I mean. And that's why Darrow, when he's 16, is basically a 25-year-old, and he acts like it, is because he's forced to mature at a faster rate. And the women are forced to mature even faster than men because the Golds, and you'll find this out more in book 2, have sociological theorems basically on how they think to divide and structure red society. So they married the girls off at age 13 instead of 16. And what they do is they saddle them with the burden of reproduction earlier on. And the Golds do this in order to basically not subjugate the women with the biological function. And it's put in their text, and they do this on purpose. And so basically, the women have to mature even faster than the men. So it's a very strange society that's artificially created because of the Golds' Board of Quality Control. And you'll see how in book 2 they do it with other colors like the obsidians and the pinks, etc. Alrighty. The pinks, yeah. Your hair is pink, that's so cute.
What book are you currently reading?
I'm currently reading the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey, which is badass, and it's going to be a show on Sci-Fi, so you should check it out. First one was Leviathan Wakes. It's really good. But I think that's it, and we should get to the signing, so everyone give a round of applause to the bookstore for letting us be here. It'd be wonderful.